carried him off. They had him bound and he rolled down the beach to escape by swimming. They dragged the boy on board. Then they were away again, full speed once more. "Well, that's done," sighed Lucile, as she settled herself at the wheel. "They've our rowboat and we have theirs. I hope that after this they will let us alone." "The person who is bothering me," said Marian with a frown, "is this little brown visitor of ours. Who is he? Where did he come from? Where does he want to go? Where should he go? What are we going to do with him?" "That," said Lucile, wrinkling her brow, "is more than I know. Neither do I know how those men came to steal him. They probably kidnapped him from his home, wherever that is, and have been making a slave of him." "I think you are right," said Marian, "and probably the problem will solve itself in time." The problem did solve itself, at least part of it, that very night. The remaining part of the problem was to be solved months later, under conditions so strange that had the girls been able to vision them lying away like a mirage on the horizon of the future, they would have been tempted to change their plans for the year just before them. The first question, what was to be done with the little brown stranger, was solved that night. He solved it himself. The girls had decided upon maintaining a watch. Lucile was on the second watch at something like 1 o'clock in the morning, when she saw the brown boy stirring in his place by the fire. She was seated far back in the shadowy depths of the tent, with a rifle across her knee. He could not see her, though she could catch his every move in the moonlight. With a gliding motion he carried his two blankets to a shadowy spot and there folded each one, laying one upon the other. He then proceeded to gather up certain articles about the camp. A small axe, a knife, fishing tackle and matches were hurriedly thrown upon the blanket. Now and again, like some wild thing of the forest, he paused to cock his head to one side and listen. Should I call Marian and stop him? Lucile asked herself. The question was left all undecided. The little drama being enacted was too fascinating to suffer interruption. It was like something that had happened in her earlier childhood, when she had lain in a garret watching a mother mouse carry away her 5 children. Lucy thereby suffered a loss of 6 cents, for she would have been paid a cent apiece for the capture of those mice. The brown boy next approached the kitchen tent. He entered, to appear a moment later with a modest armload of provisions. When these had been placed on the blanket with marvelous speed and skill, he converted the whole into a convenient pack. "Shall I stop him?" Lucile asked herself. She was about to call out from her corner, when a peculiar action of the boy arrested her. He appeared to be taking some small object from beneath the collar of his strange suit of birdskin. "I wonder what that is?" she puzzled. Whatever it was, he walked with it to a broad, flat rock, and placing it in the very center, turned and left it there. The object gave forth such a startling luster in the moonlight, and Lucile was so intent about watching it, she did not realize that the brown boy had thrown the pack over his shoulder and disappeared into the woods. When she did discover it, she merely shrugged her shoulders and smiled. "Probably for the best," she told herself. "He's taken nothing of any great value and nothing we will need badly. And unless I miss my guess, he'll be quite able to take care of himself in the wood that is full of game and berries and where there are fish for throwing in the hook. Let's see what he left, though." Cautiously she crept out into the moonlight. A low exclamation escaped her lips as her hand closed upon the glistening object. As she examined it closely, she found it to be 3 teeth, apparently elk teeth, which were held together with a plain leather thong. But set in the center of each was a ring of blue jade, and in the center of each two of the rings was a large pearl. The center of the third was beyond doubt a crudely cut diamond of about 2 carats in weight. Lucile turned it over and over in her hand. "Why, the poor fellow!" she murmured. "He's given us a king's ransom for a few trinkets and a little food. And I thought that he was stealing," she reproached herself. Her first instinct was to attempt to call him back, but, she told herself, my voice would not carry far in that dense woods. Besides, he wouldn't understand me and would only be frightened. Returning to her tent, she hid the strange bit of jewelry, which to its wearer had doubtless been a charm, then waited to the end of her watch to tell of the strange occurrence to her cousin. When Marian awoke, Lucile told her story. Together, in that early hour of the morning, they exclaimed over the rare treasure that had come into their hands. Together agreed that somehow it must be returned to the original owner, and at last, after much talk on the subject, agreed that on the whole the departure of the brown boy reduced the possible complications to a considerable degree. The next day their aunt arrived, and with her a school teacher friend. With their forces increased by two, the girls were not afraid to maintain their camp. In fear of the return of the robbers, they established a nightly watch. That this fear was not unfounded was proved by the events of the third night of the vigil. It was again in the early morning, when Marian was on guard, that heavy footsteps could be heard in the underbrush about the camp. She had left the tent flap open, commanding a view of the shore line. The gasoline schooner lay high and dry on the sandy beach, within her line of vision. This she watched carefully. A man who dared to touch that boat was in danger of his life, for a rifle lay across her knees, and with the native hardihood of an Alaskan, she would not fail to shoot, quick and sure. But the man did not approach the boat. He merely prowled about the tents as if seeking information. Marian caught one glimpse of him over the cooking tent. Though he was gone in an instant, she recognized him as one of the men who had stolen their motorboat. After a time his footsteps sounded far down the beach. Nothing more was heard from him. "Guess he was looking for the brown boy, but became satisfied that he was not here," exclaimed Marian in the morning. "Perhaps they'll let us alone after this," said Lucile. This prophecy came to pass. After a few nights the vigil was dropped, and the remaining days on the island were given over to the pleasures of camp life. The discovery of a freshly abandoned fire on the beach some miles from camp proved that Lucile's belief that the brown boy could take care of himself was well founded. His footprints were all about in the sand. Feathers of a wild duck and the heads of 3 good-sized fishes showed that he had fared well. "We'll meet him again, somewhere, I am sure," said Lucile with conviction, "and until we do, I shall carry his little present as a sort of talisman." The weeks passed all too quickly. One day, with many regrets, they packed their camp kit in the motorboat and went popping to Lucile's home. 3 weeks later saw them aboard the steamship Torentia, bound for Cape Prince of Wales by way of Nome. They were entering upon a new and adventure-filled life. This journey, though they little guessed it, brought them some 2,000 miles nearer to the spot where once again, under the strangest of circumstances, they were to meet the brown boy who had come swimming to them from the ocean. Chapter 3